thank you for coming. This is a great honor to be back on the stage for Qatar talks, organized by Dr. Jelena Chakulia. And in fact, Jelena sets the stage. She sets the brief and then puts us on the stage for a discussion. So the brief for this particular talk was with the title Beyond Beautification. Many people perceive works of public art as mere urban decoration, overlooking their vast potential to convey intricate social, cultural, and political concepts in a direct and imaginative way. This panel will address those aspects by probing into how public art communicates viscerally with its audiences, raising awareness, sparking dialogues, challenging societal norms, and shaping collective consciousness of a community. The question really is, can public art effectively educate the public about complex political issues and stimulate civic engagement? From addressing social and cultural issues to redefining spaces and identities, the conversation will navigate the transformative power of public art in shaping public discourse and fostering imagination. And it was interesting, just out there, I met Nadia for the first time. And I said, oh gosh, I'm doing this panel, and I think the answer may be no. And she said, I think that too. And then we started talking. She said, well, and I said, oh, actually, what you're saying is yes. And then she was like, oh, well, maybe what you're saying is yes. So there should be a very interesting panel. We've got a great group of artists, all coming from very different kinds of practices, different parts of the world, varying experiences, but all a knowledge of Qatar and Doha, and working here in different ways over different time frames in very different kinds of spaces and using very different artistic methods. So I thought it would be interesting just to start out for each artist to give us sort of just a 5-minute presentation of their work, either one singular project or a span of just four different projects, 4 or 5. So we're going to do a very brief introduction to each of the artists' works, and then we'll have a discussion, and then we'll open it up for questions. So first up is Najla El Zein, someone who many of you will know her work. Whether you know it's Najla's work or not is a question. But Najla was born in Beirut in 1983, moved to Paris at the age of 2, and studied at the École Commando, receiving a BA in product design and an MA in interior architecture and spatial design. Upon graduation, she worked in the Netherlands before relocating to Beirut. Her first solo exhibition, Transition, marked the debut of 3 bodies of work that acted as varied embodiments of Najla's personal journey: distortion, fragmented pillar, and seduction. The communicative power of these series conveys not just the complexity, but also the fundamental importance of human connection by exploring themes such as the unconscious, sensuality, femininity, and desire. And this is the work that you'll know by passing. To coincide with the World Cup 2022, Najla was invited by Qatar museums to intervene in 2 public spaces in Doha. As Her Him at Flag Plaza, which is just down here as you exit the museum on your right, is a monumental setting of sculptural benches totaling over 1,000 feet in length. Reflecting on human interaction and connection, the benches illustrate various modes of interaction: acquaintance, friendship, love even, introversion, confidence, familiarity, fluidity, and obstruction. And then a second piece, Her Him, is an extension of this work, which can be seen just on the roundabout outside of the National Museum. And just before I pass to Najla, I want to say that when the idea of Flag Plaza was presented to me as an idea, I said, gosh, that's going to be that's a very, very bad idea. And no one's ever going to go there. And then I came back before the World Cup, and Najla had installed her most beautiful work, and it was packed with people. And turns out to be one of the most successful public spaces, thanks, I think, to Najla in the city of Doha. So, Najla El Zein.
Hi, everyone. So that was a very long bio, actually. So I'm Najla El Zein. I'm Lebanese. I'm based in Amsterdam. I grew up in Paris. I lived in Lebanon for 10 years, and I'm here to talk, I think, most specifically about my public installation, As Her Hymn, which is at the Flag Plaza, and I invite you to go visit it if you haven't visited yet. The installation is it's a large-scale installation which was produced in Lebanon between 2019 and 2022. And it's composed of a series of sculptural benches produced in stone. So in my work, I try to abolish frontiers and boundaries, whereas them being physical or material or even between the disciplines. I'm an artist and a designer, but I'm not really sure who I am. I think for artists, I'm a designer, and for designers, I'm an artist. And I think this sense of place or non-place is quite central in my work. Probably that's why I always go for monumental works in order to impose my voice. So As Her Hymn talks about human interactions and human connections. When I was invited to do this installation, it was very important for me to think about what to do for the public space. And to me, it was natural to talk about, well, human connections and to be able to create an installation that would bring people together, to invite them, to make them sit and reflect on what the sculptures are about, and to create certain amount of connections. So we have about 600 meters of benches that were sculpted in stone, manually handmade in Lebanon. I work a lot with stone. Sorry, I'm very bad with this kind of exercise of talking in public. So this was, yes, and I'm also, so to go back to experimenting with materials, to me, what I'm very interested in is to make stone as malleable as possible. And now I'm working with glass as well, so I try to push the boundaries of glass. And this is also a bench that I have created very recently that you can see at the Design Doha exhibition. And well, that's it for me.
Great, fabulous. Okay, so we're going to pass to you, Nadia. That's you're next in line. Nadia Kaabi-Linke was born in Tunis in 1978 and raised in Tunisia and the United Arab Emirates. She graduated from the University of Fine Arts, Tunis in 1999 and earned a PhD at the Paris Sorbonne in 2008. Growing up between Tunis, Kiev and Dubai and now residing in Berlin, Nadia has a personal history of migration across countries, cultures and borders that has greatly influenced her work. Her works give physical presence to that which tends to remain invisible, be it people, structures, or the geopolitical forces that shape them. Using a variety of materials and methods, Nadia often works in situ on projects that relate directly to their exhibition sites. She has rendered visibly the bodily traces of people waiting at Berlin bus shelters and subway stations, the scars of domestic violence victims in London, and paint chips scraped from city walls throughout North Africa and Europe. Nadia.
Yeah, this exercise of presenting oneself is sometimes awkward and can be even funny. But thank you for the presentation. I recognize myself in many things that you have gathered. So to describe my work, I think one of the words that really are very much present in what I do is the word invisible. So I'm kind of like this researcher, someone is looking for that, what we don't see, but what is present in the society, within the realms of the urban space. Invisible for many reasons. It could be because we're not interested in a matter, because we think it's not important, or because it's hidden by shame, by taboos, for political reasons. So there are many different reasons why the things that are around us, we don't see them. But why am I interested to look for that which is there but we don't see? I see there is a parallel between the invisible and the unconscious. Because if something we don't see it, it doesn't mean that it doesn't affect us. On the contrary, it can even deeply affect us, but the problem is that we don't know how it works on us. So this to explain very generally why I'm interested in these kind of matters. I made a small selection of works today that I'm going to show you of some of the public artworks that I do, I work in very different medias. So I was trained as a painter. And what I keep from the painting is really my relationship to surfaces. And I think that even when I work with installations and even public artwork, this is something that's always in my work. I like the idea of layering, and especially the things that are hidden. Because in a surface, there are already two words, surface. It means that there's something above and something behind. There's always something hidden. So for me, even a monochrome is deep. It's always about taking off the layers and understanding what's behind. So let's start with some of the selections. Yeah, I started with the most recent. So this work I just presented in October in Tunis, and we see here a swimming pool in a deserted hotel, Hotel Megara. It's like a mythical hotel that is now empty. And I wanted to play on two levels, maybe humor and surrealism. This piece is called Ons, and it is a tribute to a Tunisian champion of tennis, Ons Jabeur. And I wanted to tell her story somehow through this minimal public artwork. Ons, in one of her interviews, she spoke of the beginning of her career, saying that she started in Monastir. It is a touristic city in the northern side of Tunisia. And she started playing in the hotels because in Tunisia there are no conditions for a little girl or even a boy to become a champion. So she started, it was really only her passion. And somehow, thanks to that structure that actually was harming Tunisia, which is mass tourism, she was able to become a champion. So in this work, there are two layers. First of all, I'm criticizing or trying to understand how mass tourism brought to the end of the industry of tourism in Tunisia, the way we know it. And the second thing, which is more important for me, is this invisible power of believing in one's dream. So if we take the example of Ons, and if she would have believed all the conditions in which she is, she would have never been able to get where she is. So that's why what I did is basically rebuild a tennis court inside of a swimming pool, and the position of Ons would be down, playing against gravity, and nevertheless, she's the champion. Thank you. It's to Ons, basically, also. So I'll continue. We see some details. The site is just amazing. Unfortunately, this place will be, it's really part of the history of Tunisia, this hotel. It's going to be something else. So this is the most recent public artwork, which I presented in Abu Dhabi, during Manar Abu Dhabi, and it is called Bayt al-Nur. So Nur in Arabic has a spiritual meaning, because in Arabic you can say light in two ways. You can say light, so it's dhaw, so it is not just the electrical light. And Nur is always something spiritual, coming from the inside somehow. So in this installation, what we see, I'll try to be short, it's not very evident. We have two walls. On the one side, we have a typical little window, which has, we don't have the details because it would be too much if I take all the images. So the little window is a typical mashrabiyya window, and it is placed on the east side, so where the sun rises. On the other side, we have 5 windows, and basically what we see on the other side, the first window is the representation of the shadow of the first window, so the little mashrabiyya window. The second window is the shadow of the shadow. And the third one is the shadow of the shadow of the shadow. So what is happening is I produced the mashrabiyya window and then projected the shadow with the sunlight, always at the same time. And then that shadow, I reproduced it into real window. That same window projected the shadow, etc. So what happens is that the first window has diluted its form, and the last one looks like a typical Gothic window. And the idea, and the side is on the west. So it is also the idea of the transfer of knowledge, of course, that was very natural in the past, that unfortunately today we understand it problematic. And also the idea of the shadow and the light, because for me, the one means automatically the second. You cannot save the life of someone if this person is not injured or in need of help. So darkness and light always work hand in hand. During the day, you see something like this, so you also experience how the shadow is working through the daylight, and in the night it is the shadow that turns into light, actually. So that's Baitunur. This piece is called One Day on Two Orbits, and what we see basically, it's the shadow again of a bicycle projected during 24 hours. So it's a bicycle that supposedly shows the movement that stands still to remind us of the movement of the earth, to remind us that we are part of a whole universal system and that actually the earth is also. And it is part of so it's a permanent piece in Expo Dubai, and it was commissioned for the mobility sector. And I decided to choose the curtain steel and the concrete, because these are the two materials that actually allowed the Industrial Revolution and the mobility as we know, forgetting the mobility, the inner mobility that is within us and in the planet, within the planet. So these are details. So you see the details of the shadow, of the curtain steel in the concrete. And I think I'll end with this one. So this is how a ceiling used to look. And I produced a public work within, in the context of an exhibition in the Ruhr. So it's a region in Germany. And I was attracted by the ceiling, by its raw effect. And it was the region where there was a lot of digging of coal digging. And this region became rich in Germany because of the coal digging and the development of the steel, which now it's all of this industrial area is gone. And I decided to produce this. So the digging in the earth, it's basically the pipes that go to the earth in order to dig. And this is a reference to what we call today astromining. So instead of re-questioning our relationship to exploiting the resources in the earth, the human being decided, because there are less resources on the planet, to do the same thing, but on an astral level, which is a bit surrealistic and contradictory. So basically what I did is to take that same structure of the ceiling and create a game with mirrors, create mirroring, so that we have the illusion that the pipes are going into the infinite in the sky. Sorry, there's a last one. I still have time? Okay, this is really the last one. So it's a public artwork in Berlin called Mein Stein, which means my stone, and it's actually demographic place, square. The stones represent the number of inhabitants of Neukölln, the borough of Neukölln in Berlin, which has the most number of immigrants in Germany. It was done in 2010, so it's like a picture, but a demographic picture. And the place of the stones, so all the stones were imported from the regions where the inhabitants of Neukölln come from. And we created a special software to work with the inhabitants to see how the stones will be distributed within the square. And it was all about stories and situations, speaking about their homeland and how they invested their second country, Germany. And I'm done.
Is this on? Thank you. Thank you, Nadia. And now I pass you over to Simone, different kind of practice, Simone Carenna. Simone founded a group called Moto Elastico, an orbiting space lab, and you can tell he's both Italian and a spaceman from that wonderful jacket he's got on. He founded Moto Elastico with Marco Bruno, and currently working on architecture, interiors, exhibitions, and art projects. He's born and educated in Italy, specialized in California, and has been rooted in South Korea since 2001, and is now also teaching and practicing here in Doha. Moto Elastico, in all its projects, is using irony to critically challenge and playfully celebrate local customs and behaviors. Moto Elastico has received several design awards and has been included in many prestigious exhibitions, including the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art in Seoul, the Italian Pavilion in Venice, and the Venice Biennale, and the Korean Pavilion, and the Venice Architecture Biennale. Simone.
Right, thank you very much. I will go straight to the project, because I think they kind of try to answer the question that is this panel. So art, public art, the use of it. Being an architect and being kind of working in different culture from my own, I always question what's the use, what's art for? And so, for example, this is a pavilion for Art Park in Seoul, and we were asked to design a pavilion. So in theory, it's a architectural piece. But due to the permits that the city had to go through, the curator said, why don't we do an art piece so we can go through the office of art and not the one of architecture, and reduce the time of bureaucracy. But we can still touch the artwork and use it. So the challenge was for us, architects, to become artists and to kind of save the time of bureaucracy, which is the enemy for everybody. We don't know whose bureaucracy is, but is something useful, but is also the enemy. So this is a very long bench, so somehow similar to your project, but it's not beautiful marble. It's a fiberglass filled with some concrete, built by a company that makes roller coasters, another form of strange art, but entertaining. And so it's kind of a frame of the city of Seoul, but it's also a map that tells you where all the other artwork is. So it has a functionality which is called the scroll, and you're familiar with scrolling, but as you know, scrolls were the first books, and there were normally things to note things, numbers of sheep that I sell and trade. So it had a combination of things that has a functionality, but still is a useless roller coaster that doesn't move. But it actually is very much used by people to do picnic, and they know they can climb. It's kind of dangerous. First, they wanted to stop people, but then they realize people learn. They don't go too high, and they take their own risk, like climbing a tree. You don't have a sign for every tree. You don't climb it or you're going to fall. So it was interesting as an experiment for public interaction. Another project is I won a competition to make a very big sculpture for a shopping mall. Again, art for commerce, for Instagrammability of this shopping mall in Chongqing, China, a huge city, with a former student of mine, so with alumni, based in Hong Kong. We were asked to do a competition, and we won. So we had to make something for China. We won. My father was also a sculptor, and so I was excited and said, Dad, I can do a sculpture. And I want to learn again about Michelangelo and go and see beautiful things. And then the client said, panda. You have to make a panda, which is the less sculptural animal you can imagine. I had a teddy bear as a panda as a kid, and it was very cute. But I think also in public art, we see a lot of teddy bears. We see things that are like funny things, and maybe because they're familiar, they're not threatening, they're not Michelangelo, and they're done for the people, right? So we had to do a panda, but we make it with chrome, some Ducati mood, some Italian mood. And then the panda had to hold a camellia, because this is the city not of panda, but of camellia, flowers, etc. So, but it was really a set design. So art as architecture put on the building. It's a 23 tons heavy, 12 meters long, huge panda that took forever to be built and engineered. So it was a very interesting thing, architecturally or engineering-wise. Going back to something Italian, I like to mix things. So as I told you, I'm an architect, I do some art. I love Bob Marley. By the way, today the movie is opening also in Qatar. Go to see it. I think it's fantastic. And I love only this car, which is designed by Marcello Gandini, which is the Countach. Has a great history. I was curator for the Gwangju Biennale, and I could suggest something that I wanted. And I wanted to talk about dub and mixing. So I took Bob Marley, I put him inside a Lamborghini Countach, something that never happened. If you watch the movie, nothing happened like that. But this generated something that for me was interesting, was very personal. So I mix ingredients, and I think when you do public art, the ingredient that we don't know what it is when people like, use, dislike, criticize your work. So it's kind of putting two things that are not normally together. So I use that also in my classes now. We do a dub class where we tell students to choose their own ingredients, and then we add some other spice and see what happens. This is a project we've done for Qatar Creates, for Doha, and it's shelters for cricket players. There's a great community of players from South Asia that in the early morning they go play, and they don't have shelter for the hot season. So we suggested to the government in Doha to test two things. And this is a cooperation with Michael Perron, which is a painter. So architecture and space, sport, and color. And so it's something that is functional. And finally, I think another interesting experiment was to work with minorities. In this case, we had to do a music video clip for MTV, when still was a thing in Italy. And we ask help to deaf people because they cannot hear. So for them, MTV, so music on television, would be a way to communicate. And this was the origin of my traveling through my career. So from Italy, I had made this video production. This was promoted in Asia, and I got a job in Seoul. And that's somehow how I got here. So that's the reason. Thanks to deaf people. Thank you.
And now, finally, we come to Khalid Ali. I should, full disclaimer, Khalid and I met in 2016 when I was first invited to Doha, and he was incredibly kind. I ran the public art program here for a number of years, and then retreated from that scene to Copenhagen, where he was doing his graduate studies, and we haven't actually seen each other since. And currently now, Khalid has returned to Doha to run sort of public programs at the Luan here in the city. He's a Romanian-born, Qatari-raised, Oslo-based, Sudanese, creative, political, cartoonist, and cultural producer. He's known for his cartoons that went viral worldwide since 2011. In 2018, he was named one of the top 5 cartoonists in the world by The Independent. He reminded me today he's been in the top 5 twice. In addition to 2 books in print, Cartoon and Sudan Retold, Khalid's cartoons have been published widely in international publications, including the New York Times, The Atlantic, NPR, and the BBC. His artworks have also been part of numerous solo exhibitions and biennials, the last being the widely acclaimed hidden sound installation in Documenta 15. So please welcome Khalid.
Assalamu alaikum. Most people know me as Khalid Albaih, so Khalid Ali is probably confusing a lot of people that know me for that. I'm known for my political cartoons. I'm a political cartoonist. I've been doing this because of the internet was the only space that I got growing up. So growing up here, we didn't have a lot of galleries or a lot of art like we do today. And that's why I'm very happy to be part of making art in Doha and seeing what happened in Doha through the last decades. The internet was really where I found people, where I could talk to people, where I could have a conversation. And doing political cartoons for me was first because of the space, second because I really wanted something that interested people, all kinds of people, because when you say art, especially I'm saying 20 years ago, when you say an artist, I just felt it's a very heavy word. And when I say it, people just shut down because they expect me to say some really smart stuff or be very philosophical about it, which I do, of course. But when I say I'm a cartoonist, is people smile. It doesn't matter if you're an 8-year-old or if you're a professor. And this is what attracted me more to it is that it starts a conversation, and this is what political cartoons actually do. It's a conversation starter, and while doing that, it's the only space that I could. Then when my work started going viral, people started knowing about me, and also working for QM and being exposed, which I think is very important as well. Being exposed to art and having the choice to see different sort of art and seeing what artists are doing outside, and even being introduced and which I think is a great opportunity for anyone that was in Doha for the last decades, is that we get everything here. We have the greatest artists, we have the greatest professors in the schools that are doing amazing things. So you really get exposed to a lot of things. And with that, whenever I got offered an exhibition, for example, an exhibition space, I would say, why don't I do something more than the cartoons? If you have a budget, we could do something else. And because people just like to put you in a box. And especially as a political cartoonist, you're known to be more of a journalist than an artist. So you're always in between. The journalists don't consider you a journalist. The artists don't consider you an artist. You're like in between these two things. So I try to gap that bridge, do both things. So I try to do what journalism is supposed to do, which is start a conversation, which is also what art is supposed to do as well. So this is how it started, basically. And from there, I kind of figured out that every cartoon is an idea for something bigger. And every idea that I have, I look at it on how do I manifest this idea? What is the best way to talk about this issue that I want to talk about? Is it a cartoon? Is it an article? Is it a photography project? Is it whatever it is? And from there, I just started basically just pushing what I want to do on whoever offers me the space. So I went from the internet space into the gallery space. And also, from that, I just see the need. So I worked on a photography project here called Doha Fashion Fridays, which I basically work on interviewing and taking photographs of migrant workers on their holiday, which is Friday. So we go to the Corniche right here, me and my friends and group of photographers, and we take photos and we introduce ourselves to people. So again, it's about having that conversation. And it's beautiful stories that we found out, and we had a show at M7 at the last photography Biennale. I worked on a book as well because I was part of being a cartoonist is that you tell history daily. We work on daily things. So this is how, if you look at the series of cartoons, this is what happened every day. You can tell, and this is what I've been doing since 2009. And so I figured out that that's my history. So how do I tell everybody's history? How do we start a conversation about that? Because there's a lot of stories. There's a lot of so for Sudan, for example, we have a huge identity issue. Are we Arab? Are we Africans? All of these things. So there's a lot of background stories. There's a lot of history that not a lot of people know, even Sudanese people. So I started working on this book. It's called Sudan Retold, the Sudan al-Ma'ad Riwaito. So I worked with 31 creators because I thought, why don't I get other cartoonists to tell their stories as well? So the only thing is that you have to talk about a real event or a real person that's in the history of Sudan, and then you build up to whatever you want. So it could be a history that you make yourself. It could be futurism. It could be whatever it is. It just has to be based on real facts. And then I was like, why am I talking to only cartoonists? Let's talk to everybody. So I spoke to, so the book is basically it's not a history book, it's an art book about history. So we have architects, we have designers, we have musicians, we have a cook. Everyone did an artwork about the history of Sudan, explaining what they were talking about. So again, it's the theme is also conversation and retelling what's going on. This is the documenta work. It's called The Walls Have Ears, which is an Arabic saying, or more of an Egyptian saying, I guess. It's called Al-Hitan Li Hawdan, which means that there's someone always listening to you. And when I got offered Documenta, of course, as a political cartoonist, that's a huge win for political cartoonists. made it to Documenta. So I picked a place that was very removed from where the art world is, really. The pavilions and all of that. It was a very long tunnel, a 9-meter tunnel that connects two neighborhoods, and this is also where most of the foreigners live in Kassel. It has a lot of graffiti, and so what I wanted to do was interview rejected asylum seekers from there, and these are the people that have been in camps for sometimes 12 years, and no one knows anything about them and why they've been there and all of that. So it's the tunnel for me was, it's a very busy area. It's like life, right? People have to go. You hear all these sad stories going on. Are you going to take the time to actually stand and listen to it? And you don't have to, you don't need to, but it's there. But if you take the time, then you might meet someone new and hear a new story. So basically, I hid the speakers within the graffiti. So I had to make some new graffiti in the tunnel. And being a black person in a tunnel in Germany doing graffiti is a whole artwork on its own. You know, so I had to like walk around with the documenter badge the whole day. So I left the spray cans in the tunnel at night, and when I come back, the kids from the neighborhood would have more graffiti. So it was kind of a conversation as well with that neighborhood as well. So we did like Arabic graffiti, we did, you know, all these things, and then the sound would go on. So you see people walking in with their bikes, and then they hear something. The first time they would go, the second time they'll start and listen, and the second, you know, and then slowly people will try to listen to the stories. Of course, because of my work, I always get approached by, whether it's Amnesty or whether it's, you know, Oxfam, it's all these, you know, human rights organizations that want to do a work. Of course, they want to do a cartoon exhibition, but then I push something else on them. So this is an idea. It's called Africa Light, and we worked on the map of the world, and this was about the Oxfam Africa office, and basically all the lines are made. The length was supposed to be, but it didn't really work out. It was supposed to be about the minerals that come out of Africa, and where do they go? And at the time where Africa is the darkest place, the most, you know, in terms of where everything else goes, from cobalt to gold to all of that. This is my exhibition in Mocha in Florida, Mocha Museum, and it's called Camp. And this is the actual replica of the Trump wall, the wall that Trump wanted to build in the Mexican border. This is exactly the same height, exactly the same design. And I broke the atrium of where the exhibition was in half. So you have to choose which side you go to. So you either go to this side, or you have to go leave the exhibition and come back again to go to the other side. All the passports on the ground are passports of migrants, because Florida is an entrance to the U.S. and there's a huge amount of refugees, legal and illegal, that go in from there. So also I worked with a lot of statistics and organizations that work with refugees. These are passports, original passports of the refugees that we made it into a camp. So if you just put it like that, you know how you draw as a child, you just draw like a tent. And inside of the tent, we show how they got into the US. And of course, the passports that are flying over the wall are the Americans' passports. Yeah, that's it for me.
So what I thought was, we could approach this. You know, public art is often something that sort of arrives somehow in place, fully fledged, comes up in the middle of the night, and you drive by it in the morning. But actually, it's a kind of complex process. And I thought it'd be interesting to approach this subject because, you know, the politics or kind of content of art, or does public art have a potential social possibility? From three nodes. The first being the most invisible for most people, which is production. And I see there are a number of artists in the audience, and so I'd like to look at production and what are the social and political contexts of production of public art, and then go to the distribution of work, or, you know, how is a work deployed into the public space, and what are the challenges engaging there, and then finally the kind of full content of this panel, which is really the reception of public art and your experiences in the reception. I was just having a rather interesting conversation with Nadia. We had a really long conversation, 10 minutes, right, at the beginning. But you were saying, you were talking about being fed up with Berlin right now, and you could tell us a little bit why, and you know, thinking about Tunisia, and then what the difficulties of producing work in a place like Tunisia are.
Well, why am I fed up of Berlin? I think a lot of people in the audience probably have an idea. It's very difficult today to be an Arab in Germany, especially in Berlin. There's a lot of censorship. Reminds me, honestly, of the time of Ben Ali, the dictatorial regime in Tunisia, and of the Soviet times in Ukraine. I would have never thought that I would say this about a European country, because we all lived and believed in the myth of democracy. But it feels like democracy is for them and not for us. I'm really sorry to say it like that. Even if I look white, but I am an Arab. And I have been menaced. and almost censored. But I mean, anyone can be censored in Germany today. Even Jews are censored. If you say anything about Palestine, supporting Palestine, it's automatically you're put in the box of anti-Semitism and pro-Hamas and I don't know what. You probably see I'm a bit emotional. Yeah, it's a tough one because I live there and my husband is German and I felt comfortable in Berlin because it was really, like you saw, I work a lot about immigration and it's a city that is very mixed and you can be there with your background and everything. So we really believed, not only me as Tunisian Ukrainian, but a lot of us artists who found Berlin as our home. And today I feel like it's an open question, but I would like to leave, yeah. So I was thinking of Tunisia, of course, my country that I love, but there's one of the reasons that doesn't make it possible. In Tunisia, unfortunately, artworks are still considered as heritage. So you cannot really bring in easily artworks and bring it out. And I mean, I live from my art. That's basically my passion, and I live from my passion. It's a positive thing, but that's why it's not evident. Tunisia wouldn't be an option. But yeah, thinking of Arab countries.
I think Khalid sort of brought this up, that there's an abundance of opportunities here in Doha. It's really quite extraordinary. You know, I often, I come from Scotland, and a friend of mine said that he didn't know he lived in a depressed neighborhood until a public artist came along and painted the wall on his building. And, you know, and then my other sort of experience in Scotland was there was like a very ugly old parking lot, multi-story parking lot. And the town councillor came along to me and said, you know, he had a very low budget, and he then said, it's a real opportunity for an artist. And that's quite the opposite of what I've experienced here. And yeah, maybe Simone, because we go to sort of production, you know, you teach at VCU. Do you feel that perhaps younger artists are over-resourced, that don't have the kind of challenges that Khalid was saying, that, you know, he started working through the internet, so finding spaces in public where you can work?
Yeah, yeah, it's a very good point, because if you see, I think art requires conflict, challenges, and if it's, well, we have this idea of maybe the Renaissance or a very generous person or entity or government that supports art. But even in the case, the risk is that what's produced is bought. It's like going to a market. If the challenges are more strict, then there's a reward in the process. I think what we see with our students and in the process of designing, maybe more in architecture originally, you have resources, and then how much added value you can produce. And maybe in architecture or in design, you can calculate it more easily. In art, it depends what the critic says or what the public. I think public art is this advantage that you can invite the biggest archistar or famous artist to showcase something, and then the engagement is obvious in the public. So what's the response? It's true that now we live in time of media, so everybody knows the star architect name, so they respond accordingly. So you don't have such a clear return if an artwork is good or bad, if it tells something. It could be a political reaction, it could be an actual functionality of a piece of the city that was transformed. So now I think it's a bit mixed, but I do think that very generous operation doesn't work unless there's a good curator that actually coordinates. Is the manager who really gets a lot from the funding instead of just throwing money at things, which is the risk of the competitive nature of this region, I think, right now. Not talking about Qatar, but Saudi Arabia. All this, everybody's throwing without a clear target, it seems. But when there is a target, you see the benefit.
Maybe move to Najla, because you know, maybe you could talk about the difference between making a vase and making a plaza. You know, this was certainly, as you said, you know, this is certainly the largest commission you've done. Was it one of the first public commissions in this sense. So from going to, from making really quite small, intimate works to gigantic social space in a way.
Right. Well, I've never made a vase yet. But well, for me, it was really exciting to have been invited to make a public commission. And also the way that it happened was quite surreal. I was in New York. It was my first solo show with my gallery in New York. And I've been invited by James Corner, who's a landscape architect, at his office. And I didn't really know why. Then he presented me the project and told me, come up with ideas. These are the spaces, and let's try to make it work. So that was really a dream commission for me. And as an artist, to work in the public sphere is also very different than working on your own personal works or to install them in a gallery or install them in a museum. You do have a sense of responsibility. I mean, especially with the scale that I was offered to work with. And it was amazing. And what was even more amazing is that I felt that it was important for me again, to push the boundaries of what it is to be in the public space and what to bring to the public space, how to produce this installation. So, as I said, it was produced in Lebanon. It's manual work, stone work. So already in terms of production, it's extremely challenging to sculpt over 400 tons of stones by hand in a place which is Lebanon, which is not catered to produce art in such large scales. But moreover, on top of that, it was the commission started before the explosion in Lebanon and the financial crisis and COVID. So we had to go through this project and make this project work during very challenging times. And the project actually transformed into, I think, a social project and a project that holds many symbols and being called Us, Her, Him, and it talks about human connections. I think it was such a beautiful experience to be able to also accompany the craftsman and the craftsman accompanying me and within the context in which it was produced and also in the place where it has been installed. So yeah, it was challenging, but we learned a lot from the process, and I think it was such a big chance for me to be able to experience such a great experience in Doha.
This might be a bit pushing the limits, but I kind of see that we have sort of two really quite political artists, and both of you kind of pull back a little bit, or maybe that's just not your intention in the first place. Is that a result of design over art?
But what do you mean by design over art?
I say this. So say you walk down the Corniche. We put quite a large number of artworks down the Corniche, really from Najla's work all the way around the Corniche past the Four Seasons, Playgrounds, Jeff Koons, Dugong, and I'm thinking like the Franz West, the big Franz West, which was I was quite astonished that we did that. Like it's a real like, yeah, I'm here. Like it's a big thing. It's pretty vulgar almost, or it's like it could be vulgar, right? And it's inviting in a way that's dangerous. Yours is inviting, and this isn't a criticism, it just seems to be true. Yours is inviting in a way that is inviting, right? And then it's also sort of quite dangerous in that it's quite sensual.
I don't know about yes, it is sensual, I think, but it also talks about human connections, and human connections is about interactions, and interactions can be sensual, they can be friendly, they can also not go very well all the time. But I think the main intention, having the design background, having the artistic expression, for me, it was also important to create something that would invite people in and that would allow people to take them on a promenade around the plaza and even more into the cultural museum district. And actually, it's, starting with what you were saying about the Flag Plaza, that you thought it was such a horrible place and nobody would go there. I have a funny anecdote about that, because when I came into Doha to install the pieces, the Flag Plaza was in the middle of a construction site. And I was terrified about the fact that I've been working for 3 years on a project that has been so emotionally draining for me, to think of actually creating pieces to decorate a plaza. And that was really not my intention. And then coming back a few weeks later, after the installation was unveiled, it was so satisfying to see so many people, hundreds and hundreds of people just hanging out from all ages and all backgrounds on the plaza in a very abusive way, I must say. That was really satisfying. So yeah, I guess there is, I think for sure design has a big role to play in this.
Simone, do you think irony is political?
Yeah, I think irony, it's, or comedy even more, because the punchline has to work. So it kind of is one of the question of art and design, and maybe I agree that you mentioned if you're more political or less political, it could be that the formula you're looking at is different. And like we tell our students, you're not doing art. It's almost like a threat, say, don't do art. Tell me what is it for, because we have this idea that the public will always ask you, what is this for? What is this big panda doing? So it's for Instagram, it generate money. Okay, there's a functionality. But also, Michelangelo does the same thing. It was not designed for that. It was designed for other media. So to find an excuse or a justification is important. Irony helps you to play with it and say, yeah, Michelangelo is useless, but it's necessary. I remember Valentino, they asked him, what's your concept? And Valentino just said, beauty. And in fashion, we say, okay, that's possible. Beauty, beauty, beauty. But in design, you have to be more precise. In art, you have to be more conceptual. In political art, you have to be very precise because you're hurting whether you're saying one thing or another. But in the end, we're all justifying ourselves. We are all, I think, insecure, and then we get a response that we hope is good. And I think we all mean good, in our opinions.
Can I say something political? Because I don't see myself at all as doing political art, but my work has a political content. And why do I make the difference? Because when you make political art, usually you feel that you are on the right side and you want to convince. I don't do that at all. My work is very often in the gray shades and tends to more bring questions more than anything else. And the ideal situation for me is that whether it's public or not public art, is that the spectator is inspired in a way that they would from themselves try to make a change in their lives. But it's only a spark of something that can move the spectator, the visitor, to probably change themselves. But in any direction that I don't know. It could be even the opposite of what I actually would have wished. So it's very, very open. That's why my work is not political.
Well, let me ask Khalid. The remit of this panel was to discuss beyond beautifications. I don't know if I want Khalid vandalizing my subway. But do you think artists also have a responsibility to beautification?
Yeah, I think it's part of the job. It's part of what you're supposed to do. It's part of what you're attracted to as an artist as well. It's beauty as well. So I think it's the best combination. It depends on the circumstances of it, but the best outcome would be something that's beautiful, but it also says something. I mean, that's the combination for what you want the public to engage with. Something engaging and beautiful. And if you think about it, if you want to think about it, it does make sense, or it just opens a new door for you to engage with it as well. So I think it's beautifying is definitely important. I mean, I come from Khartoum in Sudan, and Khartoum is beautiful, but it doesn't have beautification. You have to appreciate it for what it is. It's messy, and that's what it is. But there's no space to make anything like what Najla did, for example. You know, the people just sit and watch this mess. And I think this is something that every city needs. You need a place, and that's just something that's obviously it should be obvious, you know. But for cities that were just built like that, it doesn't make sense. It's not there. There's no space for it, and that's the difference. That's the difference when you know, when you travel to Europe, for example, you see that, or you travel to the US, you see that. You see it's a city that was built with a plan. And you know, for Khartoum, speaking of Khartoum, there was no plan. It was just this is the British governor's house. Everything is around that, and that's it. It's a, you know, we don't care what where everything happens. And this is, you know, but to make a plan, to have art to introduce art, for it to be part of the society, to be part of the city, to be part of the urban design, to grow up seeing that this is important and it's interactive. It's not just the sculpture of great leader so and so. No, it's interactive. You go there, you sit, you work with it. You know, this is the, you know. So it's very important, and it shows that the city cares, and this is what you care, makes you care as well about the city as well. So I think it is very important as well.
Yeah, I was sitting in Musharraf in the town square a couple of nights ago. It's a rather beautiful plaza. And then they started projecting onto the M7 building a sort of gigantic advert. You know, the kind of mushy, you know, sand dunes, a camel, people by a fire, the kind of stuff you get on Qatar Airways. And oh no, they've now another ad. There's an advert has appeared, right? And thinking about how because Doha used to have a lot of adverts. No, it didn't have electric screens. And when I first came here, I was kind of shocked that I wasn't constantly being bombarded by commercial advertising. And I was thinking about kind of how advertising is insidiously normative. Right? It has very, very strong messages, but doesn't declare those. But do you think that public art is normative, and what values do you think it brings to us?
I can say that before advertisement, all the statue used to be the advertisement. Also, there was a different perception. Maybe the functionality of art in the classical sense was very much taking the space for advertisement. So the meaning of current art form that is placed in public space wants to somehow mimics that past of advertisement. And then it's still very much related to the brand operation that goes with it. So we accept, and there's always a citation of something that we already know, because that's better for the algorithm to be successful. So, but I worked in Korea. In North Korea, the only advertisement you're allowed to see is the leaders, right? So that's extreme, but it's not so different from maybe the Medici Florence that had all the artwork I was talking about, that people that sponsored the event. So I think it's transforming, but it's more or less same a communication tool.
I also maybe we'll end on this part about reception. Legibility, you know, is kind of an interesting concept. I mean, Nadia, you've talked about a number of projects you've done recently, you know, also in Berlin. Has the meaning of those changed over time?
I cannot say exactly what's happening on the place. I mean, they're rebuilding now, so they covered half of my artwork. Hopefully it will be, when they take away the thing, it will be restored properly. But anyways, the work was done so that people really live with it on a long term. So when I produced it, we worked with the inhabitants of Neukölln, and there were really workshops. And many of the people I remember, so there was a family, for example, who participated, and the mother wanted to be there with her children so that later when the children will grow up, they can say, we come back to the square and find their stones and say, we're participating in building the stone, because they have all crosses, and the people who participated recognize through the color of the stone, because it's imported from the region where they come, and they place them also on the square. So this is something that for the people who really build it, continues also always to live. And also the people who participated in this piece, it's a very strong piece because people opened up. It was like almost a therapeutic relationship with people you don't know, because you start to speaking about these painful stories and histories, where you came from, where you left your country, how were you living in the new country, etc. But all of this is invisible to the public. The public sees a seamless, beautiful, colorful space. And I like these two levels of visible and invisible. And so it can be very dense with stories for those who participated. And for them, of course, it continues to live. But basically, it's like taking a photography. It is an abstract photography, but it tells the demographic situation of Neukölln 10 years ago. Today it's completely different, basically. Yeah. It's a historical piece, you can say.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Khalid, Nadia, Simone, and Najla. Thank you.
Thank you.